The crisp morning air held a deceptive calmness as Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth returned from her weekly book club meeting. Her grand Victorian home, usually a beacon of warmth and laughter, stood silently, an unsettling stillness clinging to its ornate facade. As she fumbled with her keys, a prickle of unease ran down her spine. The front door, usually locked, swung open with a gentle push. Stepping inside, Eleanor gasped. Her meticulously organized living room was in shambles. Cushions were ripped from the sofa, antique vases lay shattered on the Persian rug, and drawers were pulled out, their contents strewn across the floor. A wave of dizziness washed over her as she realized the horrifying truth: her home had been invaded. Panic seized her. She stumbled back outside, clutching her chest, and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported the break-in. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as police cars sped towards her residence. Detective Miller, a seasoned officer with weary eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, arrived at the scene, followed by a team of forensic specialists. He immediately took charge, his voice calm yet firm as he assessed the damage and interviewed Mrs. Ainsworth, who was now seated on a garden bench, wrapped in a blanket provided by a kind neighbor. "Mrs. Ainsworth, can you tell me what appears to be missing?" Detective Miller asked gently. Eleanor, still visibly shaken, struggled to compose herself. "My jewelry box, it was on my dresser. And the silver candlesticks from the dining room, they're gone." She wrung her hands, her gaze darting nervously towards the house. The forensic team meticulously combed through the house, dusting for fingerprints and collecting any potential evidence. But hours passed, and the initial investigation yielded little. The intruder had worn gloves, leaving no fingerprints behind. The only apparent point of entry was a shattered window in the back of the house, easily accessible from the overgrown garden. Detective Miller stood in the ransacked living room, his brow furrowed in frustration. The case felt cold, devoid of any promising leads. He knew that time was of the essence. The longer the perpetrator remained free, the less likely they were to be caught. He sighed, a heavy weight settling on his shoulders. This was going to be a tough one. He could feel it in his gut. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the city, a constant reminder of the unseen dangers lurking just beyond the manicured lawns and quiet streets. Detective Miller felt the familiar gnawing of frustration. He'd seen countless crime scenes, each a puzzle demanding to be solved, but this one was particularly vexing. The lack of any discernible trace, a stray fiber, a misplaced footprint, suggested a level of planning that was unsettling. He surveyed the ransacked house once more, his eyes scanning every detail, hoping to catch something the forensic team might have missed. He walked back to the shattered window, the point of entry. The overgrown rose bushes outside offered ample cover, making it easy for someone to slip in unnoticed. He imagined the intruder, masked and silent, creeping through the garden, their heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Miller sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He knew the statistics: cases like this, with no immediate leads, often went cold, filed away and forgotten. He refused to let that happen. Mrs. Ainsworth deserved justice, and he was determined to find the person responsible for violating her home and her sense of security. The other officers were equally disheartened. They'd spent hours meticulously searching the house, turning it upside down in their quest for evidence, but their efforts had been in vain. They exchanged weary glances, the unspoken question hanging in the air: where do we go from here? Anything? Miller asked, his voice tinged with a hint of desperation. Officer Johnson, a young officer fresh out of the academy, shook his head. "Nothing, Detective. We've processed everything we can. No fingerprints, no footprints, no witnesses." "Damn," Miller muttered under his breath. He hated these kinds of cases, the ones where the perpetrator seemed to vanish into thin air. It felt like a personal affront, a challenge to his skills and his commitment to upholding the law. He knew he had to remain calm, to maintain a sense of order and direction for his team, but inside, he was seething with impatience. He needed a break, a lucky break, anything to point them in the right direction. As he stood there, staring at the shattered window, lost in thought, a small voice broke through his reverie. "Detective?" It was Officer Davies, a quiet, unassuming officer who usually worked in records. "I think I found something." Detective Miller turned, a flicker of hope igniting in his weary eyes. "What is it, Davies?" he asked, trying to keep the skepticism out of his voice. He'd learned over the years not to get his hopes up too high, only to be disappointed. Officer Davies, usually buried in paperwork, looked slightly out of place amidst the chaos of the crime scene. He held out his hand, palm up, revealing a small, ornate object. "I found this near the broken window, Detective." Almost hidden by the curtains. Miller squinted, his gaze focusing on the object. It was a hairpin, but not just any hairpin. This one was different. It was made of some kind of dark metal, possibly silver, and adorned with intricate carvings and tiny, sparkling stones. It looked old, almost antique. "What is it, some kind of fancy hair clip?" Miller asked, his curiosity piqued. "I think it's more than that, Detective," Davies replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It looks like it's quite old, maybe even valuable. I don't think Mrs. Ainsworth owns anything like it." Miller cautiously took the hairpin from Davies, examining it closely. The craftsmanship was exquisite. He could see tiny details he hadn't noticed at first glance, delicate floral patterns, miniature birds perched on the branches, each stone perfectly placed. It was clear that this was not a mass-produced item, it was something unique, something special. "Where exactly did you find this?" Miller asked, his mind racing. Davies led him back to the shattered window, pointing to a spot near the edge of the curtain. "Right here, Detective." It was almost completely hidden, like someone had dropped it and didn't notice, or maybe they tried to hide it. Miller nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the hairpin. It was a long shot, but it was the first real lead they had. He carefully placed the hairpin in an evidence bag, his mind already formulating a plan. "Good work, Davies," Miller said, clapping the younger officer on the shoulder. "This could be exactly what we need." He knew that identifying the owner of the hairpin wouldn't automatically solve the case, but it would give them a starting point, a direction to pursue. And in a case that had been frustratingly devoid of leads, that was more than enough. He felt a surge of renewed energy, a sense that they were finally making progress. The tiny hairpin, a seemingly insignificant detail, had suddenly become the key to unlocking the mystery. The evidence bag containing the hairpin was carefully placed in the police lab, under the watchful eye of forensic technician, Ms. Emily Carter. Emily, a meticulous woman with a passion for detail, approached the task with unwavering focus. She carefully documented every aspect of the hairpin, its dimensions, its weight, the type of metal, the cut and clarity of the stones. "This isn't your average dime store trinket," she murmured to herself, examining the intricate carvings under a magnifying glass. "This is something special." Her initial analysis revealed that the hairpin was indeed made of sterling silver and that the stones were likely semi-precious gems, possibly garnets and moonstones. The style of the craftsmanship suggested that it was from the late Victorian era, making it at least a century old. "Interesting," she thought. "Someone doesn't just pick something like this up at the mall." Emily took detailed photographs of the hairpin from every angle, capturing every minute detail. She then uploaded the images to a database of antique jewelry, hoping to find a match or at least some information about its origin. While the database search yielded no immediate results, Emily didn't give up. She knew that identifying the hairpin's maker or previous owner could provide valuable clues about the suspect. She decided to consult with a local expert in antique jewelry, Professor Alastair Finch, a renowned historian and collector. Professor Finch, a kindly old gentleman with a twinkle in his eye, was immediately intrigued by the hairpin. He examined it with a jeweler's loupe, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Remarkable," he said finally, his voice filled with admiration. "This is a truly exquisite piece. The craftsmanship is exceptional, and the design is quite unique. I've never seen anything quite like it. He explained that the hairpin was likely handcrafted by a skilled artisan and that the design was influenced by the Art Nouveau movement, which emphasized natural forms and flowing lines. He also pointed out a faint inscription on the back of the hairpin, almost invisible to the naked eye. It appears to be a maker's mark, he said, squinting at the inscription. But it's too worn to be legible. I'm afraid I can't tell you much more than that. Despite not being able to identify the maker, Professor Finch provided valuable insights into the hairpin's history and its potential value. He suggested that it could be worth several $1,000s, making it a significant piece of evidence. Emily thanked him for his expertise and returned to the lab, determined to continue her investigation. The hairpin was now more than just a piece of evidence, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Days blurred into weeks, each sunrise bringing a fresh wave of frustration for Detective Miller. The Ainsworth case had stalled. Despite Emily Carter's best efforts, the hairpin remained an enigma. The database searches, the consultations with experts, all had yielded nothing concrete. The maker's mark, worn and faded, refused to reveal its secrets. Mrs. Ainsworth, meanwhile, lived in a state of constant anxiety. The joy had vanished from her eyes, replaced by a perpetual fear. She triple-checked the locks on her doors and windows, her sleep disturbed by nightmares of masked figures lurking in the shadows. Detective Miller visited her regularly, offering reassurance and updates, but he could see the hope fading in her face. He felt a pang of guilt, a sense that he was letting her down. He knew that unsolved crimes left deep scars, not just on the victims but on the entire community. The pressure from his superiors was mounting. The Ainsworth case had attracted media attention, and the public was demanding answers. He understood their concerns, but he couldn't conjure up leads out of thin air. He needed a breakthrough, a spark of inspiration, anything to reignite the investigation. He spent countless hours reviewing the case file, poring over the crime scene photos, rereading the witness statements, searching for any detail he might have missed. He even visited Mrs. Ainsworth's house again, walking through each room, trying to put himself in the mind of the intruder. He considered every possibility, every motive. Was it a professional burglar who had targeted Mrs. Ainsworth specifically? Or was it a random act of violence, a crime of opportunity? The lack of any connection between Mrs. Ainsworth and known criminals suggested the latter, but he couldn't rule out anything. As the days turned into weeks, Officer Davies felt increasingly responsible. He was the one who had found the hairpin, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he should be doing more to help solve the case. He started spending his off-duty hours researching antique hairpins, scouring the internet for any information that might be relevant. He visited libraries, museums, and antique shops, immersing himself in the world of vintage jewelry. He was determined to find something, anything, that could help crack the case. His colleagues teased him, calling him Hairpin Harry, but he didn't care. He was driven by a sense of duty, a desire to bring justice to Mrs. Ainsworth. He felt the weight of the unsolved case pressing down on him, a constant reminder of his failure to find the crucial link. The musty scent of old books and forgotten treasures filled Silas Blackwood's antique shop, Blackwood's Curiosities. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating shelves crammed with vintage jewelry, porcelain dolls, and forgotten relics from bygone eras. Silas, a man with a kind face framed by a neatly trimmed white beard, meticulously polished a silver locket behind the counter. He knew the story behind every item in his shop, each piece a silent testament to a life lived and a memory cherished. One afternoon, as the bell above the door jingled, announcing a new customer, Silas looked up to see Officer Davies standing hesitantly in the doorway. Davies, dressed in plain clothes, looked slightly out of place amidst the shop's antique charm. "Good afternoon," Silas greeted him warmly. "How can I help you?" Davies approached the counter, clutching a photograph in his hand. "Mr. Blackwood, my name is Officer Davies. I'm with the police department. I was hoping you could help me with something." Silas raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "The police? What can I do for you, officer? Davies cleared his throat and placed the photograph on the counter. It was a close-up image of the ornate hairpin found at Mrs. Ainsworth's house. Have you ever seen this hairpin before, Mr. Blackwood? Perhaps sold it? Silas picked up the photograph, peering at the image through his spectacles. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized the distinctive design. Yes, I believe I have, he said slowly. It's quite unique. I remember selling it just a few weeks ago. Davies's eyes lit up. Really? Do you remember who you sold it to? Silas paused, his brow furrowed in thought. Yes, I do. It was a woman. She was quite memorable. She had a distinctive way about her. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting off into the past as he tried to recall the details. Tell me everything you remember, Davies urged, his voice filled with anticipation. This could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for. The tiny hairpin, a forgotten relic, was about to unlock the secrets of the Ainsworth case. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense that they were finally on the right track. The air in the antique shop seemed to crackle with anticipation, the scent of old books and forgotten treasures mingling with the promise of justice. Silas Blackwood leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with the effort of recollection. She was a striking woman, I remember that much. Tall, with fiery red hair pulled back in a severe bun. She had a sharp, intelligent look about her, but there was also something desperate in her eyes. He paused, tapping a finger against his chin. She was wearing a simple, dark dress, nothing flashy. But she carried herself with a certain confidence, like she was used to better things. Davies scribbled furiously in his notepad, eager to capture every detail. Did she say anything that might be helpful? Any names, addresses, anything at all? Silas shook his head. No, nothing specific. She was very careful about what she said. She admired the hairpin for quite some time, turning it over in her hands, examining it closely. She seemed to appreciate its craftsmanship. Did she say why she wanted it? Davies pressed. She said she was a collector of antique jewelry, Silas replied. That she had a particular interest in Victorian hair accessories. It seemed plausible enough. Did she pay with cash or credit? Cash, Silas said without hesitation. All in small bills. That's another reason I remember her so well. Most people pay with cards these days. Davies made another note. Did she mention where she lived? Silas hesitated. Not directly, but I do recall her saying something about living on the outskirts of town. She mentioned enjoying the peace and quiet of the countryside. Davies's heart leaped. The outskirts of town, that's something we can work with. He thanked Silas profusely for his help, promising to keep him updated on the case. As Davies left the antique shop, he felt a surge of optimism. The woman with the red hair, the cash payment, the mention of the outskirts of town, it was all starting to come together. He rushed back to the police station, eager to share his findings with Detective Miller. He found Miller hunched over his desk, his face etched with fatigue. Anything, Davies? Miller asked wearily. Davies grinned. I think I've got something, Detective. A name, a description, a possible location. He laid out the details of his conversation with Silas Blackwood, watching as Miller's eyes lit up with renewed interest. The outskirts of town, you say? Miller repeated, his voice filled with anticipation. That's exactly what we need. Let's get a team together and start canvassing the area. Show Blackwood's description to the local residents, shopkeepers, anyone who might have seen her. He clapped Davies on the back. Good work, Davies. You've given us a real shot in the arm. Let's hope this leads us to our burglar. The hunt was back on, fueled by a tiny hairpin and the sharp memory of an antique shop owner. The outskirts of town were a patchwork of quiet residential streets, sprawling farmlands, and pockets of dense woodland. Detective Miller assembled a team of officers, armed with copies of Silas Blackwood's description of the red-haired woman. They started their search systematically, knocking on doors, showing the description to local residents, and questioning shopkeepers. The initial results were discouraging. Most people either hadn't seen the woman or couldn't recall anything specific. The officers trudged on, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. Detective Miller, however, refused to give up. He knew that even the smallest detail could be the key to cracking the case. Meanwhile, Officer Davies focused his efforts on the local businesses. He visited the small grocery store, the gas station, and the local diner, showing the description to the cashiers, the waitresses, and the customers. He sensed that someone, somewhere, must have seen the woman. At the Happy Kettle diner, a waitress named Betty, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile and a sharp memory, paused as she looked at the description. "Red hair, you say?" she asked thoughtfully. "Tall and striking?" Davies nodded eagerly. "That's her. Have you seen her?" Betty snapped her fingers. "I think I have. There's a new woman who moved into that old cottage down by Willow Creek. Keeps to herself mostly. I've only seen her a couple of times, but she fits the description." Davies's heart skipped a beat. "The cottage by Willow Creek? Do you know her name?" Betty shook her head. "No, never asked. But she always pays in cash, and she always orders the same thing, black coffee and a slice of apple pie." Davies thanked Betty profusely, his mind racing. The cottage by Willow Creek, it was exactly the kind of isolated location the burglar might choose. He immediately contacted Detective Miller, relaying the information. Miller's eyes lit up. "The cottage by Willow Creek, that's it. That's our lead." He gathered the team, their faces filled with renewed determination. "Let's pay a visit to this cottage. It's time to find out who's living there." As the police cars sped towards Willow Creek, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The tiny hairpin, the antique shop owner's memory, and the waitress's observation had all converged, leading them to a secluded cottage on the outskirts of town. The hunt was nearing its end. The truth, they hoped, was just around the corner. The cottage by Willow Creek was small and dilapidated, its paint peeling and its garden overgrown with weeds. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. As the police cars pulled up, their sirens silenced, a figure appeared at the window, peering out with wary eyes. Detective Miller approached the front door, his hand resting on his holster. He took a deep breath and knocked firmly. "Police. Open up." A moment of tense silence followed, then the door creaked open, revealing a woman who matched Silas Blackwood's description perfectly. Her fiery red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes held a sharp, intelligent glint. She wore a simple, dark dress, and her expression was a mixture of defiance and fear. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "We'd like to ask you a few questions," Detective Miller replied calmly. "My name is Detective Miller, and this is Officer Davies. We're investigating a recent home invasion." The woman's eyes narrowed. "I don't know anything about any home invasion." "We found this at the scene," Miller said, holding up a photograph of the hairpin. "Have you ever seen it before?" The woman's face paled slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "I have no idea what that is," she said, her voice unwavering. "We have reason to believe that you purchased this hairpin at Blackwood's Curiosities a few weeks ago," Miller continued. "Is that true?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "All right, fine. I bought it. So what? What does that have to do with anything?" "We believe that you may have been at Mrs. Ainsworth's house on the night of the robbery," Miller said, his gaze unwavering. "Can you explain that?" The woman scoffed. "I've never even heard of Mrs. Ainsworth. You've got the wrong person." "We have reason to believe that you're lying," Miller said, his voice hardening. "We have a witness who saw you in the area. We have evidence that links you to the crime. We're going to need you to come down to the station with us." The woman's defiance crumbled, replaced by a look of desperation. "Please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just desperate." Detective Miller nodded grimly. "We'll talk about it at the station." Officer Davies read her rights. The game was up. The woman at the cottage by Willow Creek was about to face the consequences of her actions. The tiny hairpin had led them to her doorstep, unraveling her carefully constructed lies. Back at the cottage, Officer Davies carefully searched the area behind the fireplace, following Clara's instructions. He ran his hand along the rough stone wall, feeling for any irregularities. Finally, his fingers brushed against a small, almost imperceptible indentation. He pressed on it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled in a velvet pouch, were Mrs. Ainsworth's stolen jewels. The silver candlesticks were there, too, wrapped in a protective cloth. Davies carefully removed the items, placing them in evidence bags. He felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was returning what had been taken and bringing closure to Mrs. Ainsworth. Meanwhile, Detective Miller called Mrs. Ainsworth, informing her that they had recovered her stolen property and apprehended the suspect. Mrs. Ainsworth was overjoyed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Oh, Detective," she said, "I can't thank you enough. You've given me my life back." Miller assured her that they would return her belongings as soon as possible. He knew that the recovery of the stolen items would bring her a sense of peace and security that she hadn't felt since the robbery. As Clara Bellwether was led away in handcuffs, she glanced back at the cottage, a look of regret etched on her face. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and she would have to face the consequences. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the cottage by Willow Creek. The police cars pulled away, their sirens silent, leaving the cottage once again shrouded in darkness. But this time, the darkness was different. It was a darkness filled with hope, a darkness that signaled the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one. The tiny hairpin, a seemingly insignificant object, had played a crucial role in bringing justice to Mrs. Ainsworth and uncovering the truth behind the home invasion. It was a reminder that even the smallest details can have a profound impact and that even in the darkest of times, hope can always be found. The community could breathe a collective sigh of relief. They were all safe once more. A few days later, Mrs. Ainsworth sat in her living room, surrounded by her recovered possessions. The silver candlesticks gleamed on the mantelpiece, and her jewelry box sparkled on her dresser. The house was no longer a scene of devastation but a sanctuary of peace and security. Detective Miller and Officer Davies visited her to check on her progress. Mrs. Ainsworth greeted them with a warm smile, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you both," she said. "You've given me so much more than just my belongings back. You've given me my sense of safety, my peace of mind." Detective Miller smiled. "We're just glad we could help, Mrs. Ainsworth. It's all thanks to Officer Davies and his sharp eye for detail." He turned to Davies, clapping him on the shoulder. "You did a great job, Davies. You should be proud of yourself." Davies blushed, feeling a surge of pride. He had started as a junior officer, relegated to paperwork, but he had played a crucial role in solving a major crime. "It was nothing, Detective," he said modestly. "I just wanted to do my part." "Your part was essential, Davies," Miller said. "You proved that even the smallest details can make a big difference. You have a bright future ahead of you." As Detective Miller and Officer Davies left Mrs. Ainsworth's house, they felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that they had made a positive impact on someone's life. They had brought justice to a victim, apprehended a criminal, and restored peace to a community. The case of the Ainsworth home invasion had come to a close, but the memory of the tiny hairpin and the lessons it had taught would remain with them forever. It was a reminder that dedication, persistence, and attention to detail can overcome even the most challenging obstacles and that even in the face of adversity, hope can always prevail. The smallest clue led them to the answer. A tiny hairpin, an overlooked detail, the key to solving the case. And the community was safe once more. News of Clara Bellwether's arrest spread quickly through the town. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, detailing the home invasion, the stolen jewelry, and the crucial role played by the antique hairpin. Mrs. Ainsworth became a local hero, admired for her resilience and her unwavering spirit. People stopped her on the street to offer their support and express their gratitude. Detective Miller and Officer Davies received commendations for their outstanding work. They were praised for their dedication, their persistence, and their commitment to justice. Officer Davies, in particular, became a bit of a celebrity. He was interviewed by the local television station, and his photograph appeared in the newspaper. He was recognized by strangers on the street, who thanked him for his service. He remained humble, however, never forgetting the importance of teamwork and the crucial role played by others in solving the case. He knew that without Emily Carter's forensic expertise, Professor Finch's historical knowledge, Silas Blackwood's sharp memory, and Betty's keen observation, they would never have caught Clara Bellwether. Clara Bellwether, meanwhile, awaited her trial. She faced a long prison sentence for her crimes. She had lost everything, her freedom, her reputation, and her chance at a new life. As she sat in her cell, she reflected on the events that had led her to this point. She had made a series of bad decisions, driven by desperation and greed. She had hurt innocent people, and she would have to pay the price. She thought about Mrs. Ainsworth, the woman whose life she had disrupted. She felt a deep sense of remorse for the pain and suffering she had caused. She also thought about the tiny hairpin, the seemingly insignificant object that had ultimately led to her downfall. It was a reminder that even the smallest actions can have far-reaching consequences and that every decision we make has the potential to change the course of our lives. The entire town had been touched by what happened. The impact rippled far and wide. Justice had finally prevailed. As the trial approached, the prosecution team worked diligently to build a strong case against Clara Bellwether. They presented evidence linking her to the hairpin, the stolen jewelry, and the cottage by Willow Creek. They also called witnesses who testified about Clara's financial struggles and her gambling problem. The defense team, on the other hand, argued that Clara was a victim of circumstance, a desperate woman who had made a mistake. They tried to portray her as a sympathetic figure, emphasizing her remorse and her willingness to cooperate with the police. The trial lasted for several days, with both sides presenting their arguments and examining witnesses. The jury listened intently, weighing the evidence and considering the testimony. Finally, after deliberating for several hours, the jury reached a verdict. They found Clara Bellwether guilty of burglary and theft. The judge sentenced Clara to 5 years in prison. He acknowledged her remorse and her difficult circumstances, but he emphasized the seriousness of her crimes. "You violated the trust of the community," he said. "You caused pain and suffering to an innocent woman. You must pay the price for your actions." Clara accepted the sentence with a quiet dignity. She knew that she deserved to be punished for what she had done. As she was led away to prison, she made a silent vow to use her time wisely, to learn from her mistakes, and to emerge from prison a better person. The Ainsworth case was finally closed. Justice had been served. The community could rest easy, knowing that the perpetrator had been brought to justice. The tiny hairpin, the antique shop owner's memory, the waitress's observation, the forensic technician's expertise, the detective's persistence, and the officer's sharp eye for detail had all combined to bring the case to a successful conclusion. It was a testament to the power of teamwork, dedication, and attention to detail. And it was a reminder that even the smallest details can have a profound impact on our lives and on the lives of others. The community would remember this story. They would learn from it. It would serve as a reminder of what's important in life. Years passed. Clara Bellwether served her time, and upon her release, she was a changed woman. She sought out Mrs. Ainsworth, offering a sincere apology for the pain she had caused. Mrs. Ainsworth, a woman of great compassion, accepted Clara's apology, recognizing her genuine remorse. She even offered Clara a helping hand, giving her a job at her bookstore. Clara worked diligently, proving herself to be a reliable and trustworthy employee. She became a valued member of the community, earning the respect and admiration of those around her. She never forgot the lessons she had learned in prison. She remained committed to living an honest life and making amends for her past mistakes. Detective Miller and Officer Davies continued their careers in law enforcement, solving countless crimes and serving their community with dedication and integrity. They often reflected on the Ainsworth case, remembering the crucial role played by the tiny hairpin. They learned that even the smallest details can have a profound impact on our lives and that every action we take has the potential to change the course of history. Mrs. Ainsworth continued to live in her grand Victorian home, surrounded by her cherished possessions. She never forgot the kindness and compassion shown to her by the police and the community. She became an advocate for crime victims, offering support and encouragement to those who had suffered similar experiences. She used her story to inspire others, reminding them that even in the face of adversity, hope can always prevail. The story of the Ainsworth home invasion became a local legend, passed down from generation to generation. It was a reminder that justice can be found even in the most unlikely of places and that even the smallest objects can hold the key to unlocking the truth. The moral of the story was simple: never underestimate the power of observation, dedication, and compassion. The world is full of mysteries, just waiting to be solved. And sometimes, all it takes is a tiny hairpin to change everything. The end. Let's rewind a bit, back to the weeks leading up to the home invasion. Clara Bellwether wasn't always a thief. She was once a hopeful young woman with dreams of a better life. But a series of unfortunate events had led her down a dark path. She had lost her job, her savings, and her sense of hope. She had fallen prey to the allure of gambling, believing it was her only way out of debt. But instead, it had become an addiction, consuming her life and pushing her further into despair. One day, while walking through town, she noticed Mrs. Ainsworth's grand Victorian home. She saw the expensive cars in the driveway, the manicured lawns, and the glittering jewelry Mrs. Ainsworth wore. A seed of envy began to sprout in her mind. She started observing Mrs. Ainsworth, learning her routines, identifying the best time to strike. She saw her leave for her book club meetings every Tuesday morning, and she realized that was her opportunity. She visited Blackwood's Curiosities, drawn to the antique jewelry on display. She saw the ornate hairpin and was captivated by its beauty and its potential value. She knew that if she could sell it, she could make a quick profit. She purchased the hairpin, paying in cash, careful not to leave any trace of her identity. She then began to plan the robbery, meticulously considering every detail. On the day of the home invasion, she dressed in dark clothing, wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. She crept through the overgrown garden, approaching the house from the rear. She shattered the window with a rock, careful to minimize the noise. She slipped inside, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She ransacked the house, searching for valuables. She found Mrs. Ainsworth's jewelry box and the silver candlesticks. She grabbed them and fled, disappearing into the shadows. As she ran, she didn't notice that she had dropped the hairpin near the window. It was a small, seemingly insignificant detail, but it would ultimately lead to her downfall. She returned to her cottage, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She hid the stolen jewelry and the silver candlesticks in the secret compartment behind the fireplace, relieved to have gotten away with it. But deep down, she knew that she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. The guilt weighed heavily on her conscience, and she lived in constant fear of being caught. Now, back in the present, as she sat in her prison cell, she realized that her desperation had blinded her to the truth. She had made a terrible mistake, and she would have to pay the price. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ainsworth was slowly recovering from the trauma of the home invasion. She installed a new security system, and she took extra precautions to protect herself and her property. But more importantly, she resolved not to let fear consume her life. She refused to become a prisoner in her own home. She continued to attend her book club meetings, to volunteer at the local library, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. She found strength in her community, and she vowed to help others who had experienced similar tragedies. One day, she received a letter from Clara Bellwether, expressing her remorse and begging for forgiveness. Mrs. Ainsworth initially felt anger and resentment, but as she read Clara's heartfelt words, she began to feel compassion. She realized that Clara was not just a criminal but a human being who had made a terrible mistake. She decided to write back, offering Clara her forgiveness and encouraging her to use her time in prison to reflect on her actions and to make amends for her past. And that is how, years later, after serving her time, Clara found the courage to seek out Mrs. Ainsworth and to ask for her forgiveness in person. Mrs. Ainsworth, in her wisdom and compassion, saw the genuine remorse in Clara's eyes and offered her a second chance. The story of Mrs. Ainsworth and Clara Bellwether became a symbol of hope and redemption, a reminder that even the most unlikely of friendships can blossom from the ashes of tragedy. It showed the community that forgiveness can be a powerful tool and that even those who have made mistakes are capable of change. The world always has room for improvement, for kindness, and compassion. The end. The years passed, and the story of the Ainsworth home invasion faded from the headlines. But the lessons learned remained, etched in the hearts and minds of those who were involved. Detective Miller often told the story to new recruits, emphasizing the importance of thoroughness and attention to detail. He reminded them that even the smallest clues can be crucial in solving a case. Officer Davies continued to serve with dedication and integrity, earning the respect of his colleagues and the community. He never forgot the Ainsworth case, and he always remembered the tiny hairpin that had made all the difference. He became known for his sharp eye and his ability to spot things that others missed. He was promoted to detective, and he went on to solve many more crimes, always guided by the lessons he had learned from the Ainsworth case. Mrs. Ainsworth and Clara Bellwether remained friends, their bond forged in the fires of tragedy and redemption. They often spoke about the importance of forgiveness and second chances. They became advocates for social justice, working to help those who had been marginalized and forgotten. They used their story to inspire others, reminding them that even in the darkest of times, hope can always prevail. And so, the story of the Ainsworth home invasion became a legend, a reminder that justice can be found even in the most unlikely of places and that even the smallest objects can hold the key to unlocking the truth. The power of observation, dedication, compassion, and above all, never underestimating the power of a tiny hairpin. The end. And so, the tale concludes. The home invasion that shook a community, the desperate act of a woman driven to the edge, the compassion that blossomed from the ashes of tragedy, all were intertwined, connected by a single, seemingly insignificant object. The ornamental hairpin, a relic of a bygone era, became a symbol of hope, justice, and the power of human connection. It reminded everyone that even in the darkest of times, light can always be found, and that even the smallest details can make a world of difference. It highlighted the importance of observation, reminding people to pay attention to the world around them, to notice the small things that others might overlook. It demonstrated the value of dedication, showing that persistence and hard work can overcome even the most challenging obstacles. And above all, it celebrated the power of compassion, reminding people that forgiveness and understanding can heal even the deepest wounds. The story of the Ainsworth home invasion and the tiny hairpin would continue to be told for generations to come, serving as a reminder of the values that make a community strong: justice, compassion, and a belief in the power of hope. The end. The moral of the story: never underestimate the power of a tiny hairpin.